basically, what I've learned over time is that it's really hard to think crooked and walk straight. So that's sort of the game we're wrestling with. How do we pull that sort of thing off? How do we get our thinking straight? Because that's going to generate uh, a game to action. So what I want to do is I want to talk about a subject, and then I want your questions. So if you want to start shooting your questions in, that would be awesome. Do say hi. Make sure I'm heard okay. Um, the Dark Lord runs the internet, so technology is often and always a challenge. Jody will be here in a moment. But in understanding this game, so the reason what we're doing is so valuable is that I'm giving you ways to think about things that hopefully are different than how you think. Sometimes we need encouragement, just someone to tell us we're not crazy, or we're only pre-crazy, and that's super. But what I'm hopefully doing is getting you to think about things in a different way, and I'm doing that out of especially my not only training but experience with having homeschooled 5 kids and having 11 grandkids now, and uh, being involved in the life long term of ministry as a pastor and then counseling and coaching entrepreneurs and just the variety of things I do because of my attention deficit squirrel problem. So with that in mind, as you're tuning in, understand that there is a link here. So we think a certain way, and then what comes out over here is action. And if you think in a poor way, what's going to pop out here likely is going to be bad action. Or if you execute really well on a plan that is not good, it won't be a good result. If you have a good plan and don't act, that's another problem. But the game with us as humans is this: there's a thought in play, and then there's a feeling that goes with it, and then there's action, right? So what happens is we really want to understand how this game of feelings operates, because that's a lot of where the challenge and trauma is with our kids, with our spouses, relationships, etc. Because we're all acting on feelings. So like emotions, if you break it down, of motion, emotion. It is what gets us in motion. We are all emotional creatures. I know there's a lot of literature out there that will say, well, some people are feelers and thinkers, etc. And I've been through the training, but I'm going to tell you, as a thinker, it really feels good to think straight. Okay, so it's still in there, and just because you have a thought, it doesn't mean it uh, generates a feeling for action. So what I want you to understand is it's not what happens out there, it's actually your interpretation of what happens. And when you can start understanding that, you can interact with your kids and others and yourself in an entirely fresh way. So one of the illustrations I remember hearing over the course of time was, I'm hoping people are on. Oh yes, I see people are on. Good. So nobody had said anything. You're riveted about emotions, so I appreciate that. Um, so emotions, when you understand what's going on, you're upset, for example, because you're thinking upsetting thoughts, right? Happy thoughts, sad thoughts. And when you understand that, it's not the event that's happening, it's actually how you're thinking about it, the frame, the spin, the interpretation you have for that event. So one of the examples I heard was like rain. So it comes down a rain, okay, a hard rain. So if you are sitting in your bed on a Sunday evening, it's been a good weekend, you're settling down to go to sleep, and it starts raining outside, and you hear it on the roof. Well, your a common emotional response would be pleasant, like it draws you into sleep. It's nice to know that you're safe and warm, and the rain's coming. Now, if you were a farmer who had a farm and it was about to go under because of a drought, and the rain comes in such a way that it saves the farm, well, you wouldn't be calm sleeping. You'd be out in it dancing, you know, doing a little jig. Hallelujah. Now, imagine a third scenario that you're a bride and it's your wedding day and you're literally just starting to walk down the aisle and it's an outdoor wedding and the rain comes. So how are you going to feel there? And it's just an illustration to show you that it's not what's happening. The universe is not out to get you. Okay, things happen, and some of them are bad, and some of them are good, and some of them are kind of neutral. But all of this is dependent on how we look at these things. And so when you're dealing with children or yourself or spouse or friendships or whatever, learning how to not exactly fix them, though that's can be helpful, but more importantly, how to get a grip on your own thinking. That's going to be far more strategic. That's why I have a course on this stuff about how to master your emotions. Because if you can start getting a grip on what's going on emotionally with you, because it's based on something you're thinking, uh, it'll change your life. So for example, in homeschool, if you look at your house and the way you frame it is it's chaotic. I don't know if the kids are learning anything. They're not getting their work done. I don't know where they are. That way of thinking would kind of panic you, wouldn't it? Instead, you can also do something amazing like uh, see things as progress or improvement. So we look at how are we doing here in an area, and let's figure out how to improve it. And in this area of homeschooling, it's better this week than it was last week. It's better this week than it was last month. And if you take an improvement mindset, you can get it all somewhere. If you take an absolute, it's got to work or not, like a black and white, they call it splitting viewpoint, it's going to torture you. So a lot of what we do here, and what I would invite you to do, is start working on how exactly you are thinking about situations, and learn to think of it with some in some different ways. Generate another way to look at another angle. I like to call this walking around the statue. So like a statue, a marble statue, if you walk around, you can see it from different angles. If you can also climb the high dive, not 30,000-foot view, too high. High dive, you can see the pool. Old people over here, little kiddie pool over here, teenagers over here. You kind of get a picture. So if you look at things with that kind of mindset, you can start having a clearer emotional response and then better actions. And that's what we're doing here. So I need questions about homeschool, family, motivation, parenting. I've had some written in that we'll get to, but I want to invite you to put your questions in so we can tweak our thinking. So Jody's coming in here, and yeah, so I'm getting a question up here, and
hey everyone, can you scoot that way?
I can. So let me click this in here. Okay, so there's Jody.
Happy Friday.
Anything you want to say? I
Hope
told them,
everybody's having a good summer.
yeah, I told them that it's hard to think crooked and walk straight. That was the whole talk.
Definitely is.
All right. So I won't be able to join live today, but if you could speak to my situation, it'd be great. Do you have a suggestion for communicating with a teen son who is defiant and disrespectful, whether it's related to school or anything in general? Now, I think this could have been addressed in an earlier one of these episodes, but it was still in my notes, and I wanted to revisit it because I think this is not an uncommon issue with people. So what exactly do you do of a 16-year-old son? So let's think about the context of this. The son is, it's not just teenage, it's true, but I mean David had killed Goliath about this age, right? So it's clearly not a little boy anymore. It's on certainly the brink of manhood, something like that. I think we settle into our personalities and identities for sure around 21. Doesn't mean that can't change, but it's a period of time where they're settling into who they are. Now, if you have a teenage son, I don't know anything about this. So I don't know what defiant is. I don't know what disrespectful behavior is. I don't know an example. So, with all that in mind, in fact, if you're on the line, shoot details. But it was emailed to me. Uh, if I can just assume some things, I can address it that way. So we got a teenage son who maybe isn't doing his work, who's griping, who is difficult to deal with. So there are two things I would look at. Well, primarily, this is borderline like rebellion, and I have a video out there called "The Only Two Reasons Teens Rebel," and it's at like almost 100,000 views. So apparently punched a nerve. Maybe I should write the book. Um, and it gets down to this: teens rebel for one of two reasons. They either want to get out or they want to get in. And I'm not saying there's not more to it, neurochemistry and all kinds of stuff, but on balance, what you're seeing in a person that's functioning this way is they either want to get out or they want to get in. They're rebelling because they just want to escape and they're trying to get out of the game, or they're doing stuff that's grabbing attention because they feel not included in the family. So I would look at that thing first. The second thing I would look at is your parenting style. Now, actually, more important would be, are the husband and wife, mom and dad, aligned? If they're divorced or something like that, they still need to be aligned, but it's going to be its own trickery. But if they're like-minded, I mean, a lot of my experience with the boys, the problems we had with the boys is when Jody was not making full use of me as the dad, because we had decided early on that the boys needed to favor their dad and be fond of their mom, and the girls need to favor their mom, be fond of their dad. And so at one point, basically by the time they were teens, Jody would formally give them over and say, "All right, you're in charge of dealing with them." And so when I would know about things, I would deal with them. And I wasn't cruel or harsh or anything, but I was very different with the boys than I was with the girls, because testosterone poisoning interprets things quite differently than estrogen poisoning. And so making that game clear with the boys and me, being a little bit of boo, I'm the dad type thing, um, really helped them respect her, uh, as well as get in line with what needed to be done. Now here's the problem though. If the dad's not involved and you're involved as a mom and a teenage son, if you're parenting that son as though, like, let's say you're an awesome mom, awesome mom for a 9-year-old kid, that's great. But if you function with a 16-year-old like he's 9, or if same with a daughter too, it's going to be a mess, because it's going to feel oppressive, and they're going to be fighting back to have their own space, their own whatever. And by the way, I'm not dismissing the fact of dysfunction. They just be sucked into a skating, gaming, uh, vape smoking subculture. I don't know. I'm just thinking about things people have mentioned over the years. But if you can understand this, you can start looking at it and make sense of the fact that you need to balance what you're expecting compared to what's happening. And so with a teenage son, where I would do, and I do this top to bottom with kids, I actually would just pick one area where you want compliance. It may be his math, it may be, I don't know what it would be, but make that the issue, because once you can get a child to understand the game, you can understand the game of what you really expect and what matters to you, and then they're doing it. It's all over, because now they know that they can do it, and they can do it. And so I would definitely settle down into that one particular area and really concentrate on it. So anyway, I hope some of those thoughts help, especially without the details of this. But it's very much that thing. In general, I've found with children, a big part of the problem is they don't know what we expect. And so if you can get a picture in your mind of what you really want to see from their behavior and talk to them about it, not getting on to them, not shaming them. And by the way, moms, shaming boys just irritates them. I know it's kind of an orientation thing, but it's not going to work. They need a much more clear idea of what you want, and then consequences, ideally backed up by unity of the two. All right, so whew, I hope that was helpful. Uh, Now, Jessica just shoots in my 6-year-old son. Oh, good. You can do this one.
My 6-year-old son will finish memorizing all his math facts in 2 months. He just turned 6. I think this is great, but I think he's too young for math by 4. Should we start, or what should we do in the meanwhile? Good question. Congratulations on memorizing the math facts. Fantastic. I this is my first thought is, one, how's his reading? Because when we handed them those Math 5-4 books, it was that they could do them on their own. They could read the lesson, work the problems by themselves. We weren't sitting beside them, doing it with them. So that might be a reason to say, okay, let's wait on it. There's plenty of other things you could be doing, working with them. I don't know. What are you thinking?
Well, I think that's a great point. They got to be able to read to do math on their own. So if you're sitting by them reading to it, it's not going to do any good. However, we started our kids, some at 10 earlier years on math, and they did great, programmers, all the rest. Settled more around 8. So there's a brain readiness for some of this stuff. But you can also have some kids, it's a curve, right? So some kids are ahead. So let's just say your 6-year-old has a math chip. We had a child with a math chip. He probably could have started at 6 for all I know. Don't you guess? But if you'll take the approach to math that we encourage you to take, you'll figure it out. So he starts 5-4. Okay, so it's not doing a lesson a day. So maybe he does 5 problems. And does he get them all right? Or maybe he does 10. I don't know how many problems are in a lesson, 20 or so.
Yeah, when you do.
Yeah, so you can still go at a pace. I would not personally be inclined unless he's just advanced and really has something he really wants to do. I feel the same way about writing. Some kids are really ready to start writing on their own at 8 or earlier ish, and have good dexterity and all the rest. Go for it, but you're not in a rush.
Right.
And so being able, there might be an intermediate game with math that's more fun and tactile stuff. I don't remember back in school we had all those uh, long rectangular colored things.
Cubes.
Yeah, whatever you call them, you would know. And other things we could do with counting and patterns and other stuff.
That's what I was actually thinking. We've got our oldest grandchild is, her mother's got a math chip. She's got a math chip, and just some learning, educational toys that they've put in front of her, like puzzle type things, not jigsaw puzzles, but copy the pattern. These different educational. I was sitting there with her when she was 4, and she could put this thing together, and I'm like, it was taking me 3 times as long to figure out what she was doing as it did her. And so there's other things
but even jigsaw puzzles have a connection to math, strange enough. So our son Brooks, who is a bit of a math whiz, perfect SAT math score and majored in math at the University of Texas. He, as a little kid, would sit there and work puzzles till his back hurt as a little guy.
Right.
So there's some correlation with that. But you can think of it in that sort of a way. But 6 is kind of young, but you might find supplemental things to do it, or you might play around with it. And basically what math does is when you get to stuff that's tougher on you, you slow down. I would say this, I'm a little bit with David Elkind, maybe not that extreme, but he wrote a book about the hurried child. And we don't need to be in a hurry. The whole culture is saying hurry. We don't need to be in a hurry. We don't need to take a few years off either. We need this is sort of a slow and steady wins the race type game. So I think you're going to have to play with it. But your child, every area with our kids, we're really wanting to let them go at a pace that is challenging enough, doesn't produce anxiety, doesn't produce boredom. So enough of a challenge to stay involved. So
Hope that helps.
I look forward to seeing what you figure out. So on the other question, Tans, thanks, helpful, good. Yeah, I hope. Um, Mostly, I try to think about me. If it makes sense to me, I'm hoping it's going to make sense to you. Honestly, it's about like humor. If I think it's funny, I'm thinking maybe you'll think it's funny. It's not always true, as Jody would notice.
Most of the time, he's very funny.
Yeah, so we have a new book coming out. You can see behind me, called Enjoying Problems, and it's all problem solving stuff. Um, it's finished, and I would say within the month or so, it's going to be available online in an ebook form. I'm going to sell it. I'll let all of y'all know it's available really cheap. But I want to get a good population of people using it so I can get testimonies and stuff for when we release the public version. It's kind of the way I'm thinking about it. So hope that's a good idea. We'll find out. What are the questions? I've got two more, but I would much rather answer your live ones. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I will think though.
What's for supper?
I do not know the answer to that.
That's a question. All right. One other questions I got. Let's see what's happening here. Someone wrote today, best way to motivate yourself. Pop up. Best way to motivate yourself to do what it takes for weight loss. I know you've touched on this before. Did you use intermittent fasting? I just found out that I have high cholesterol, which apparently runs in my family. I want to lose maybe 15 pounds to see if that helps. Okay, so I the lessons here actually should apply to most anything. Okay, so it should apply to homeschool or teaching math or whatever. Um, so I used to weigh 186. Today I weighed 131. Okay, and I'm not tall. Yeah, it was a fine weight for if I was 6'4". Um, so it's been a bit of a struggle all my life. Growing up, we had nothing but food, cookies available anytime, chips, sweetened tea. I mean, just constant barrage. I mean, that's how moms and dads who are busy and couldn't spend time with you loved on you. That and give you a little money. So what I began to figure out, there are a lot of pieces to it, but like in the past 3 months, I've realized my weight had creeped a little bit, so I've lost about 10, 11 pounds. I've got 2 to go, and then I'll be fine, or as far as what I want. So here's the way it works. Intermediate fasting. Okay, well, yeah, between meals for definite. So we're just talking about how long a fast is. Um, the old joke is somebody asked, I think it was a major league, it's like Tommy Lasorda or somebody. It wasn't him, but it's something like that, major league coach or whatever. And they said, "How'd you gain all that weight?" He said, "Well, it sort of snacked up on me," and that's a part of the game. But I'll tell you the problem with us and weight. It's not metabolism. This is what people think. You got a metabolism thing or an allergy thing or whatever thing. The problem we've got is actually in the food supply, in my humble opinion. This is all opinion. I ain't a professional. I'm just sharing my thoughts. Um, Consult your doctor always. So when you look at it with food supply, I'll come back to it. But what goes on in our bodies is if we take in more calories than we burn, then we gain weight. If we burn more calories than we take in, we lose weight. Do I need to go over that again?
No.
Okay. So, and you know this, you can look at Holocaust pictures, okay? people dying, starving to death. Too few calories, right? Or like my friend Burt Banks, Bataan Death March, starvation situations are a function of not getting enough food, right? We know this. But the weight gain is a function of taking in too much. And what the body does instead of getting rid of the excess is it stores it because it doesn't know when you're going to starve or do well. And some of us may have a greater tendency to store than others, but on balance, it's math. And if you take in more calories than you burn, you'll gain weight. That's just how it's going to go. Sorry. And you see these people, they're thin, and they're very active and they're busy little hummingbird, zipping around. They're burning a lot of calories. It's not that they have a high metabolism, they have a high activity level. And so trying to get your metabolism changed doesn't matter. If you rev up your metabolism, let's say you just take guar gum and caffeine and some aloe vera and throw a little saw palmetto in there, and for some reason it kicks your metabolism up. Well, that kick won't matter if you eat beyond whatever the kick is, because that's the way it works. And so when you understand this, here's what you want to start doing. You want to understand that what's important is not to eat more calories than you're burning. And the way to figure that out is to sort of keep up with it. I'm not trying to say exactly count calories, but you can estimate. And that's what I do. So I look at my day and I roughly know, because I've watched it enough to know about what I burn in calories. So for me, it's 1,200. It might be 14, 12. The books will say 2,000, 2,200. I mean, I'm a grown man, right? But sorry, here's some of my activity in the day. Then I might write something down. That's not very active. Now, I do run 3 miles, but still, you're not going to outrun this game. You're going to understand about the caloric intake. So if I know that, then I've got a plan in my day to make sure I take in, if I want to lose weight, I need to take in something less than what I burn. So let's say I burn 1,400, I'd want to take in maybe 1,100, 12, because the way it works out is about every 3,500 calories, that's a pound. So if you lose a pound a week, that's a pretty good pace. That's whatever it is. Do the math. I just lost my mind. So if you have 7 days at 300 calories, that's 2,100. So that's not quite, but that's close enough. So every 10 days or so, you'd lose a pound. That's roughly right. The trick is you've got to catch on to the fact that our food supply is calorically dense. With packaging and saving materials, etc., that caloric density means you can eat a little something and it can load you up with calories. Like, you can eat a drink of Coke. And by the way, liquids count. They have calories in them. So you can drink a Coke, a regular Coke, and it's like 240 calories. You know how many carrots you'd have to eat? That'd be like 10 pounds of carrots or something. And so when you're eating calorically dense food, you're just tanking up that thing. So if it's cake or Twinkies or even like a hamburger, you get a Big Mac and a fries, or what did I figure that out? Did a Chick-fil-A, because we have friends that own them and everybody loves Chick-fil-A.
They were very
But
high.
yeah, just a regular meal and waffle fries, never mind the shake or something, but just that in there, I would be at half my calories for the day or more with that one meal. Yeah, with that one meal. So you want to pay attention to the fact that there's caloric density. The intermittent fasting stuff, it seems to work for some people, but like with most diets, the problem is you've got to stay on that diet. And there's some data that it doesn't work. The question is, and I've done all kinds of diets in my life, and what I'm at now is it's not about diet, it's about caloric intake. That's the game. And what I've found is if I will not eat and then make my meal, I know roughly how many calories, a point of enjoyment. So I actually taste it, slow down, like this is what I'm going to get to eat. I'm not going to snack. I'm not going to whatever. I get this meal. I get that meal. That's my game. Uh, well, if you understand it that way, then you're going to savor and enjoy that meal. And when you savor and enjoy it, it gives your time for your brain, your stomach to like have the conversation. So you're happy because once you're full, you don't want to eat stuff. If you have a boredom issue or emotional crisis, that's a part of the problem. But generally, what you want to do is just watch it. Watch the basic calories you take in and figure out, does that make you gain, stay about the same? You drop below it, you can lose weight, you go back up, and you'll stay the same. That is absolutely how the game works. And if we want it to work another way, it's just going to be a problem. And all these diet fads and all the rest, that's what they do. They're playing the game a certain way, but to get that result, you have to kind of stay on it. And I'm going to tell you, it's just not going to be as good a strategy. You just need to catch on. If you're in America, you live in a country that food is way too available and a sedentary life is way too available. So I'd say exercise is good. But more than anything, you're going to have to just pay attention to this fact. And if you'll stick with that and eat less calories than you burn, you will lose weight. You cannot but lose weight. There's not a way not to do it. If that makes sense. So, other questions? Come on. Gotta have things. Parenting, motivation, organizing the household, learning disabilities, ADHD. There's nothing out there that I can't say I have no idea, but it's a great question.
I'll say just on the food topic, just some little things that we had learned at one point, just slowing down, noticing what you're eating,
Tasting it.
tasting it, like take a bite, then put your fork down. These are just practical things. Your brain doesn't know you're full for like 10 minutes after you've eaten. So like give your brain time to catch up with the fact that you've eaten. And for us, and it's easier to do because it's just the two of us at this point, but just don't have things available that are risky foods like sweets or chips.
Yeah.
Or
sometimes it's
just,
the end of
don't have them
the
here.
last verse in Romans 13. It says, "Make no provision for the flesh to fill the lust thereof." So Jody just knows I can't have chips. I'm not that mature. Or
I mean,
pretzels.
we've gotten to the point where like we have those things because we have other people over or something. I send them home with people, or I'll throw a half a bag of chips away if nobody took them, because otherwise we will eat them.
Yeah.
And we know that will not be good for us. So
Right.
I don't have I can't eat 3 chips a day and be happy.
We can throw them out through taking them in our body, or we could just throw them out.
Oh.
So anyway, not to be gross or weird. So this is a pretty tough note I got from someone. It says, I was recently diagnosed with a brain tumor. I'll be having surgery. What would be your recommendations for the, quote, low energy mom or the family going through something like this who is homeschooling? How would you prepare before surgery? And I'm sorry. How would you prepare for surgery, and what would be your suggestions for keeping kids learning during the lengthy recovery? So, first, certainly, huh?
Prayers.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just.
Well, no, I was
just
saying I'm so sorry to hear this, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. There are surgeries that it turns out good, slow recovery, but it's just a thing that happened in life, and I had lots to go. Sometimes recovery takes a long time. Sometimes it doesn't go in a good direction. But not knowing the future is a better place to be instead of pretending what's going to happen. So when you look at something like this, and it could be any kind of surgery or something that can slow you down dramatically. It's not just low energy, mom, but it's also low availability, because in the recovery process, you just simply aren't going to be able to function or do things. No bungee jumping, for example. Big trips, probably not. There's probably a fair bit of bed rest and some getting back in the system. I don't know that, they'll have a game for you. But when you look at this sort of thing, um, it really matches what we try to stress on independent homeschool. See the book right there. Um, and that is really training kids to be their own teachers. And so you want to be the chief learning officer. So what you're doing is trying to engage them in the learning process. The most tactical thing you can do in helping kids become self learners is measure. So if you measure how much math they got done, measure what their grade was, measure the number of pages they read, measure the number of pages they wrote. So you keep up with that. That by itself will tell you what's going on, and it'll motivate them. It keeps some accountability. So one of the pieces, whether you do it if you have older kids or help from friends or spouse or whatever, is you're wanting to have a mentality that we're going to keep doing school. Life does not stop because of crises. Sometimes we take a few day break, but there are going to be other things. There are things that happen in our life, and we don't want to simply stop and lay down. We want to keep going, keep in the process of learning. In fact, the learning for the kids will be very therapeutic because they either won't just get into trouble because they're not getting supervised, but they will instead work, learn, mature, be engaged in the process. So I would say in that regard, you want them to understand we're going to keep doing school. We're going to do it this way, make some adjustments. But the real key is going to be, are they getting the work completed day in and day out, and are we recording it? Because you're going to be able to look at that like that and tell what's going on, whether you're in the room or not in the room. Now, otherwise, with this kind of situation, and we've had similar ones, we've done that, we've actually taken in some kids for periods of time and helped them just join our homeschool. That would be an option that you might need to consider, or having someone who's willing to come and play a proctor role, just hang out with the kids while they're doing homeschool. Might be a ministry of different friends, because the kids still could have a question or something. So you might consider that sort of thing. What are you thinking? There's another piece of this I want to answer, but
No, I totally, everything you said, great. I can remember a time when my mom, it was just a appendix out or some, I don't know, some surgery. And that's when I learned to use the washing machine, wash and dry the clothes and things like that, that also could be a part of some, we don't know the ages of your children, but yeah, just, and hey kids, this is what's going to be like as far as we can tell. This is how, we need you really pitching in, and just kind of get them on board too with what's going on with y'all as a family. But getting somebody else in is a possibility, or far minimum if it's a possibility, just depending on how you're doing with everything. I think you won't even know probably until afterwards.
Right. And this is also going to be a good opportunity for the family to pull together. How do we team up and get through this? You just want to stress that, because there will be different times for different people, have different challenges, and we're going to pitch in together and make it easy. I can tell you this, it's not going to make it easy on your recovery if they're not learning or they're misbehaving or whatever. So some of the best ways they can help mom is to do school, because that takes a little bit of a burden and any guilt or anything that can happen, that happens to all of us in those situations.
And I was just thinking too, just you might already have all this in place. We don't know, but as far as systems, this is what letting them know what's expected, letting them know where they're supposed to record what they've done that day,
Yep.
Having those pages maybe already printed out, as far as like a little sheet that says Susie's math, the date, how many problems she was supposed to do, how many problems she did, how many she got right, just anything like that. Go ahead and have those things ready.
Jody always had their own notebooks with all those things.
Yeah,
right?
Every kid had their
I think
own.
it's good. If you're having a problem with getting them coordinated and motivated, actually figuring out a chart with all of them and those pieces, like on the refrigerator out in the open, so we can see what your grade was, how many pages you got done. It creates a different level of accountability. Shouldn't be a big deal. You just do the work for the day. But you might think about that. All right, planners. Anyway, I hope that helps, and
Yeah.
we'll certainly be in prayer. And like Jody said, get ready to pray. How do you feel about having a planner? Okay, so we're going to hear two different answers. Jody?
No, you you go first.
No, this is
I don't
somewhat
know.
personal. How do you, Jody,
I
feel about
know.
having a planner?
Uh, I like the ideas of planners. I like planners, but I'm like a lot of people would not end up using them that well. Um, and it depends. I mean, I'm not sure how exactly what you mean by plan. I mean, our routine of school was planned because we did Robinson and we had this is what we do for math, So I had pages that they would be. I already knew that, so I don't know. I like the idea of them, and it makes you feel good to check those things off.
Makes some people feel good.
It makes some people, and there's so many different kinds out there. Um,
Yeah, so the other piece of this question was I find people buy one, fill it up, and never use it, or just use it initially. So a planner is going to work on a bell curve. So there's some people at one end of the bell that are going to be planner amazing. They are planner holics. They are planner gurus. They can plan their work and work their plan. Other people on the extreme, like probably me, I like to figure out a plan, lose it, find it later, see if I got anything done, kind of like a to-do list. What I would say that works for everybody. Well, let me say it this way: if planners work for you, enjoy them. So, but what works for everybody is not exactly a planner, but a plan. And so a plan would be a sequence of steps or activities that you can repeat over and over every day, a process. And that's why, we didn't need much more than the way we did it. So we had, they got up, they had an hour of writing, that would be writing and corrections. And if they got through early, they could go on to the next thing so they could finish the day earlier. They had an hour of math, had an hour reading, uh, hour math, hour reading. I think we threw 30 minutes
little break,
of a break,
exercise
exercise,
break, or
basketball,
yeah,
or running the neighbors, play outside, something, just a break in the middle of it.
physical activity.
Yeah, physical activity. And yeah, don't go in and look at a Game Boy or something like that. Some body moving type thing, right? Um, so if you have that sequence, then then the quality of what they're doing with math, quality of what they're doing with reading, quality of what they're doing with writing, you can up that, add new books, move things around, etc., etc. So it's more that sequence or plan. Now, inside of that, if you have a calendar online, the family shares field trip to the museum, you put that in there. We would know. I would sometimes want to teach something to the kids, so I would substitute an hour of reading for my hour of whatever the study was. Could be Bible, could be something else. So I'm trading it out, but it's still following the overall plan. So there's an overall quote scope and sequence, on a day in day out basis, and that exact game was what governed what we did, rather than having a detailed plan. I'm getting to this goal and that goal and whatever, but rather an ongoing regular basis. Just think about it. If you're doing math problems every day, you're writing every day, and you're reading every day, and day in, day out, you're going to be developing skills in writing, which is human communication and thinking, in reading, which is human communication and learning from the great minds of history, and math, and that's going to be the language of science and logic and understanding absolutes and such things. And so it's going to tighten up that thinking part of the game. Day in and day out, some progress, some more. You're kind of golden. Doesn't mean you can't obviously supplement with, especially as they get older. We did outside classes in art and uh, instruments, but you can have foreign languages, all kinds of things you can add into the game. But overall, what you're wanting is a plan more than a planner. The planner helps fine, but we can I found we can kind of overdo that planning detail, and it's only like 20% of the population that really can tolerate it and follow it. And when you do it that way and it gets messed up, it just gets complicated because we got to move things around, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not like, look, you're homeschooling. You're not running a plumbing company with 5 trucks that you're trying to coordinate all the activities. If you get all the kids working on the same thing at the same time, your life gets really simple. If you have each kid on a different schedule and plan, your life gets miserable. So our kids are up at 7:30. They can't start until everybody's at the table. So they were responsible
Yeah.
to get everybody there. They wrote, they got feedback, they did math, they got checked, they did reading. We asked questions about it, or they did each other. Rinse, rot, wash, repeat, and uh, that's the game.
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah. I mean, if your life is complicated and complex, you probably need a planner.
Well,
We would simple. I mean, I just think,
yeah, if your
yeah.
life is complicated and complex, you need a simplifier,
Yes.
not a planner.
So,
So you just want to make things much, much simpler.
yeah.
And the way you make things simpler, I'm just going to tell you overall, machines or whatever, is you reduce the number of moving parts. So the more complexity, the more moving parts, the quicker it can break. And that's on anything. That's the nature of the game. So, McGuffey, read that.
Did all your kids read the McGuffey readers? Did you guys just have them go through them on their own, or did you do read aloud with them? Was your strategy different with those particular books? Ooh, interesting. I told Fred at one point, if I'd known we were going to be doing this forever, which I love doing and he loves doing, I would have taken much better notes with what I actually did especially when they were little. So if I'm recalling right, it wasn't something I did with all the kids. I do remember using some of them with the last couple of kids, and I'm not sure why that changed. I think some of them might have read them on their own, just as part of as Robinson. I'm not remembering.
No,
The
they
other
did.
ones,
I
the
know they did.
little ones, I can remember using it as a kind of a textbook with when I was teaching some of the little ones to read.
Yeah, well,
But
what you're not remembering
yeah,
is when we started in Robinson, we had some older kids and some younger. And so the older kids were having to go, we still want them to do it and backtrack and just read through quickly. So they read probably the Little Peppers and the whoever, the Horatio Algier stuff and the McGuffey, whatever's in there. But we wanted them exposed to it, but we didn't make it a big requirement to master it. The younger ones, I think, what I remember you doing is slowing down a little more with it.
yeah.
But a lot of this stuff with reading, I want to make a distinction between reading and math. So with reading, gang, you can miss something and then catch up later and make sense of what was earlier, even in reading a book. You can kind of miss a character and then you learn a little more and you go, oh, yeah, that's what that was. And it pieces together. So being paranoid about getting everything right in the reading process is not necessary. You can relax a little bit about that. Get phonics down, get them reading. If they miss something, you can go back and read it. Math is different. If they don't learn this principle, they can't do the next one. If they don't learn that one, it'll haunt them later. So you want to make sure they're really mastering, even if it's slower, the math step by step. The reading stuff, it's not quite as crucial. It's important. It's important they learn to read. But we found we did this with the kids and a lot of things. They really moved ahead too fast sometimes, and so we'd go back and have them reread something when they were much older and capable of reading it. Like I told a friend of mine one time, I said, "Hey, I think I've finally gotten old enough to read Faulkner," and he said, "No one's that old," and he's probably right. But yeah, it's that game.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong in that, I don't think.
How often did you require your kids to do topical essay tape writing assignments? I had my kids do a book report on the completion of every required book. Was that your topical report strategy? So I have out there a way to do book reports. It's in the materials, but you can also find if you just Google Fred Lybrand book reports, it'll show up somewhere. And and I think it's a helpful way to do it. We didn't do it every required book, but we did it regularly. I think um, a little more later on, we got a little better about that sort of thing. Essays themselves, I still think that you ought to wait till they're around 13, maybe 14. They need a mature prefrontal cortex and essays about their own opinions, and they're just going to mimic stuff they've heard when they're younger rather than really trying to think it through. So that's what you're trying to do. I think book reports are great, especially on good books. That's good practice for them. And the way I show you to do it, where they're giving an opinion about what I liked about the book, what I didn't like, that kind of thing. What was good, what's not great. More than just recapping the book. It's a good process for kids. But inside of that, with essays, when they get older, doing an essay um, maybe a week, 1 day a week, once they know how to do it. What we recommend and figured out was we would get them to work on one essay. We have an essay course that goes with the writing course, so they'd go through that. And then they would work on the essay, and they might work on this essay for a month or two. I'm sorry, not every day, but they might have a day or two a week that they go back to their essay and improve it. And we keep working on it to get it in the right form, to get the right illustrations, the right quotes, because once they mastered an essay and had one that was done right and they did it, then from then on, they're going to know what an essay should look like, or at least our version. Different professors get in college or upper level something, they may have their own twist and you get to figure it out. But that was our game. That was about how often we did it. We really just liked them writing every day on whatever they wanted to. We were not that uptight about it, and out of that, they're all really good writers, and four of them um, have written books. Uh, well, three have done books, and one's a full-time. I'm going to count that into publishing, and Laura does write stuff, but not this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
So
three of them, you could find their stuff on Amazon.
yeah, you go to Amazon, hit Librand, you can find
Right.
Tripp and Forrest and Brooks. Is that the right one? Yeah. So did you stick with RC book lists with the kids, or did you substitute as you went? How did you cope with kids not being enthusiastic with a particular one? So this varied. So, like, how did we deal? Let's start with the unenthusiastic. So let's say they were unenthusiastic about the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. What did you do?
Okay. So on about four of the different books that were really hard to digest, maybe, I don't know what to say, we actually just had them read part of the book, like half of it, just or a fourth of it. We just, and sometimes we would also, and I think some people in Robinson realize this, that book, some of those that are early on the list actually needed to be later.
Yeah.
So we would do them
Or
later.
some were almost impossible until they're much older, like all the dialect in Brer Rabbit. What's the name of the book? Is that the name of the book? I'm going to say Song of the South. And now I'm in a Disney controversy.
Uncle Remus.
Uncle Remus.
Sorry.
Some of that's just too much, especially for younger ages. You're just not going to get anything out of it. So you have to use some discernment. And like I said, sometimes, or Jody said, sometimes you come back and read it later. We would substitute books in two periods of time. One, when we're getting them going on reading, but a lot of that, the books they enjoyed reading, they would read outside of school. So they learned about learning discipline just to read the stuff you need to read. And they were usually surprised that they enjoyed stuff. They're not enthusiastic, but most of us, I mean, I rarely, whenever I read anything like a novel or something, it takes me 40 or 50 pages to get into it, So it's not uncommon not being enthusiastic. You don't have to be enthusiastic about everything in life, because you're always going to have stuff. Like I was enthusiastic about being married, but I wasn't enthusiastic about getting married, right? So Jody was, and I was for her. But the getting, the process, like the wedding part, no. The being, yes. Well, this is it. So books are bridges to things. You want to learn stuff. Maybe you want to be entertained. Maybe you want to catch on to stuff. Maybe you want to make mom and dad happy. I don't know. But the bridges are, I mean, the books are bridges to things. So you're wiring up your brain, you're learning vocabulary, learning to think, learning to read, learning to interact with the great ideas, etc. So that's just part of the process. And a lot of times you get enthusiastic by the action, not before the action. And we live in a world where everybody, oh, I don't feel like it, like that means something.
Yeah,
Um,
it was not like each kid got to decide what they wanted to read and not.
no.
It was we pretty much stuck with the
What
list.
what we did offer them was every, I think it was like every third, maybe every fourth book, they could pick out a book they would like. They might go to the library or whatever, and if we approved of it, they could substitute it in.
Well, yeah,
So
put
that
it in there, not substitute out another book, but
no, yeah,
read it.
just add it in.
Yeah, yeah.
So there we got, let's say Robinson books A, B, C, and D. They would do, or E, C, D, E, F, G. They read A, B, C, and then they would put in a book, and then they're back on course with D, and it keeps going.
An approved book.
Yeah, approved book by us. But what we found in time is they quit doing it. Finally, they went, nah, I just would rather do my Robinson, knock it out, and read what I want to. Later in the senior year, I would get a stack of different books on apologetics and how to do life and money. I don't know. I'd grab them all out of my library and go, yeah, you ought to read this, and give them a stack of books and say, read them. And when you're done, school's over. So
that was the end of their senior year.
Yeah, the end of their senior year, last 2 months or something, they could finish a little early. And I know y'all would like a list of those books. And if Jody will remind me, I'll make a list of those books. So good morning. Good morning, Zay. So hello, my daughter finished public school this week. Congratulations. And when she came home, she was extremely sad because she knows that she's going to be homeschooled in September. So let me read this. What do you think? I'm getting there. What do you think would be the best way to deal with this matter? That's a great question. So the best way to deal with this matter is to one, acknowledge that you get why she might be sad. You might want to find out what she's thinking. It could just be social. Is it going to be harder? Is it going to be too easy? She loved her. I don't know what is going on in her head, but might want to find out. But the trick is to help her understand that she doesn't know how homeschool is going to go. She thinks she does. That's why she's sad, and so she's thinking sad thoughts. But it could be that she learns to love it. Our kids learn that they put 5 hours of school in and no homework, and they could do what they want to and still get to hang out with friends and all. It was great compared to how much time school took up. So her not knowing the future is going to be a huge help, right? So if she can admit that she doesn't know the future, it will chill her out. The other thing is, I would invite her. I don't know how old she is, but I said, let's team up and figure out how to make homeschooling great. I want it to be great for you. You want it to be great for you. You've got in your mind it's not going to be good because of, whatever. Let's just figure out how to make it great. And what we'll do is we'll have a meeting. I'd say, let's have a meeting at the end of each month of homeschool and say, we're going to ask questions. What went good and what's not quite right? And let's make a list and come up with some ideas of how to improve it. I think you'd be shocked about how much that'd help.
Yeah.
That's where I'd start. All right. So yes, we want that list of those books. Yeah. And some of them are crazy. So
I will say this. I mean, he will come up with a list and it'll be a great list. It wasn't the same books for every kid. It was and because there's always new books out there too.
Well, and I'm reading new books out there, and each kid might need a little something unique to them.
Yeah.
Right.
I will say that they weren't novels. These were like practical life type books, like we were saying.
Well, yeah, like
setting goals, how to deal with money, apologetics,
like The Richest Man in Babylon. All your kids ought to read that before they graduate. So it's like these scrolls are uncovered, and it tells the rules of gold and how it works, and it's stuff like about whether you should own a home or not, invest in things you know about or whatever. But it's done as a storyline, and it was written in the Depression era. A guy named Clausen or Clausen. So it's, that's a book they ought to read. There are some others they probably ought to read. They probably should read As a Man Thinketh. That's a pretty good discussion. A little too far on New Thought, but it's close enough to go, hey, your thinking affects what happens. So kind of what we talked about earlier.
And we've been, even as adults, out of our house. A lot of Christmases, they all get a book that Fred's enjoyed that
Yeah.
year on whatever.
Yeah.
Don't know if they read it or not.
Don't
It's just
have
given to
any
them.
idea. Not really my concern.
know,
I just want to give it to them.
it's something we've continued to do.
We sent them a fruitcake too. I don't know if they
We
ate
did
it.
not send them a birthday.
All right, it's been fun. I hope this was helpful. Hey, look, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not subscribed, and share this with friends. And obviously, you mark likes and all the rest. The algorithm makes it available to more people. And we hope you found this helpful. And we'll catch you next week. Don't be afraid to email questions.
Yes. Have a great weekend.